Halacha, again, continuing with the matnot kuna, with the gifts to the Kohen. Yesterday we introduced the concept of Zoroa, Lechayim, and Keva. Still here on the board, the three of the limbs of the animal, which have to be given to the Kohen. And I wanted to clarify two last items before I give you a treat. I have a special graphic I want to show you.
Oh, I thought you brought us a shoulder and part of the liver.
That would be steaks for steaks from the shoulder. I like it. A shoulder roast. That would be perfect.
I was gonna say we suddenly start hearing man coming from the next room.
Instead, we have somebody brought us. You know what these are called in Hebrew?
Peanuts.
They're called kabukim.
Does that just mean nuts?
It's peanuts covered with this coating. That's what they are.
Wait.
Coated peanuts. Kabukim.
What's the one that's called American peanuts? Is it this? Or?
That's just peanuts.
Oh,
It's peanuts without a coating. That's called American.
They call these American peanuts, so I've heard that. I've always been like, why? I have no idea.
I don't know. Well, peanuts
do
come from America.
But the coated ones, they call the American ones. I don't know.
I don't think so. As far as I remember, these are called. In any case, so the Kohen has to be given a little bit of each animal. So that means the Kohen's got to hang out and or be called over whenever you're slaughtering an animal. So in the day when the slaughter was family by family, that was practical, and we said before with the truma, it was a good thing to connect him to the religious leader. He would have inspiration, he'd have contact. Nowadays, all slaughter is done in a slaughterhouse. I think for hygienic reasons and for health reasons. So the Kohen's going to go to the slaughterhouse, and he's going to get a lot of meat. More than he can eat. It's just not one animal here. He's going to get meat. There's enough meat for a year. So nowadays we do have freezers, but still, is that the idea? The idea was to provide for the constant contact with the Kohen on a daily basis, and to give him food, so that he could have dinner have a nice dinner with his family, and to support the Talmid Chacham. Therefore, the better idea is that it's done in a more centralized way. The system is something we mentioned before regarding Ma'aser Ani. If some of you were not here, some of you were here. We talked about that. It's really impractical to every time you pick a few vegetables from your garden and make a salad, you have to go find the poor person. He's not going to want half a tomato anyways. So how do we do it? What we do is we give a loan to the poor at the beginning of the year.
Is that the 10% of our?
So which years do we give Maaser Ani? You weren't here. We went through it in quite detail. Which years do we give Maaser? 3 and 6. Excellent. Year 3 and year 6. Year and 6. 3 and 6 at the end of the 3-year cycle, before there's a Shemitah. During that 3rd and that 6th year, instead of giving Maaser Sheni, which was brought up to the temple, that year we give Maaser Ani, and that's given to the poor people. How is it done? What we suggested then is at the beginning of the 3rd and the 6th year, you give a loan of, let's say, $1,000 to a poor person. And then each time you need to separate out some from your produce, even if it's worth 1 or 2 shekels or 10 shekels, whatever it is. You don't have to give it to the poor person. You just say, you mark it for yourself. I am forgiving the loan of those $10. And so basically you're giving him a gift very easily on paper. But it's real because you're not going to be demanding the loan back. And that way we do the same thing with the Kohen. The Kohen, we basically, how can it be practical to give him these gifts? We give him a lump sum, let's say $1,000 at the beginning of the year, or you're giving a month. Here there's no cycle, so really choose whichever is convenient for you. If you slaughter a lot of animals, then it'll be $1,000 every month, whatever it is. You give him the $1,000, and then each time when you slaughter an animal, instead of giving the limbs from that specific animal, you just take it off from the IOU that he has towards you, and he'll owe you $900 each time. If it's worth $100, each time his debt will get less and less. So you're giving the value to the Kohen. We already mentioned that yesterday that as opposed to truma, there's no special holiness, purity necessary. So you don't have to give him that specific limb You can give them the value of the limb, and that's kosher. And that's what's usually done. I'll just finish and then I'll take your questions. Okay? This is the concept, of course, of makirei kahuna, people who are well known, kohanim that are friends of yours, the ones who you make these deals with. To all of your Zoroa lechayim and keva are going to go to them. They're called makirei kahuna. And again, the idea is, who are you going to do that with? Which kohen are you going to give the $1,000 donation to? Ideally, it's a Talmid Chacham. You'll give one who is a Rosh Yeshiva or somebody who has who's supporting Talmid Chacham, because that's the idea, to support the religious leaders. Now, there are reasons to be lenient with this mitzvah. Let me just finish and then I'll take questions. Okay, in 2 minutes. Okay. And there's very easy ways to get around it. As we said, if you just make a partnership with a non-Jew, so you don't have to do this mitzvah, unless, don't get confused. You might have heard of this, that some people sell the hind legs to a non-Jew. That's a different thing. That's for a different reason. That's because there's the sinew in there that's not kosher. And instead of getting involved, it's very hard to make sure that it's kosher. You got all the pieces of that sinew, which is forbidden. Sometimes the meat producers will just say, that part I'm going to sell to a non-Jew, and we won't have anything. That's why it's hard to find, what's that called? Filet mignon. Filet mignon it's called. It's hard to find it kosher because many meat producers don't bother. You can.
Well,
You don't have
expensive to get it just because they won't bother. You can get it, but it's very expensive.
It's going to cost you more. So don't get confused. That many times a part of the animal is sold to the non-Jew for that reason. We're talking about the opposite. If you did that, the front part of the animal is where you have to give the limbs from, right? The shoulder is in the front, and the cheeks are in the front. The keva is sort of in the middle. But yeah, exactly. If you sell the back, and then from the front you got to give to the kohen, you won't have. We're not talking about the same thing.
It's interesting from the other point of view that would make sense why the front has to be given to the kohen. So you give the kohen's getting the meat, which is basically salted, soak it, salted, and toss it on the grill. Whereas what you're keeping for yourself is the one that you're gonna have to do a bit of work on to first.
True. Let's finish up, guys. I want to finish up just one more thing, and then I'll take your questions. So I want to show you this amazing graphic I mentioned yesterday, and I looked it up and I found it for you. I brought it for you. So I want to get there. So let me just finish this. Basically, many people are very lenient about this mitzvah, and they just avoid it. Like I said, we sell many kashrut organizations that supervise kosher meat. They don't bother. They just say, we'll put a non-Jew in ownership, part ownership, and then you don't have to give anything to the kohanim. Rabbi Menachem doesn't like that. He says that's not right because the mitzvah of the Torah applies in Israel, maybe even Doraita, and why use a loophole? Support. In any case, you have to give tzedakah. Right? There's a custom.
Yes, but you can give
Moshe. Two Moshes. It's disturbing because it's a little echo in the room. So when there's the side conversations, I can't hear myself think, and my throat hurts after teaching all morning. So just try to keep it quiet. In any case, nowadays there's a custom. I think I mentioned it to you before that you give 10% of your earnings to tzedakah. Right? You might have heard it. People call it maaser ksafim, which means a tenth of your earnings of money. Now that's not from the Torah. The Torah, you give as many coins as you want. You don't have to give specifically a certain amount of your income. But why is this custom? Why is this custom? Why is this custom developed? Because really we don't give the 10 or 20% which we used to give of the actual produce, the in-kind donation system, which we've just been describing for the last 2 weeks, Truma, Meiser, all those things really, they're not usable nowadays. And in a way, the Meiser Ksafim, the tenth of your earnings in cash, in your actual bank account, that is in many ways patterned after. It's a replacement for the in-kind donations. So same thing nowadays with the Zoroa, L'Chayim, and Keva. You're supposed to give a certain portion of if you are a meat producer, if you have cattle that you slaughter. So you should give the 10% of your earnings. You happen to be lucky that your earnings actually are something where there is a biblically mandated type of tzedakah. But essentially it comes out to be the same thing. So you should be giving some tzedakah. It qualifies if you give this matanot kuna to a kohen who's a talmid chacham, you're supporting his yeshiva. It's the same thing, whether you give it out of your earnings, disconnected from the actual animal limbs. So Rav Melamed really is a big fan of actually doing this. The way to do it, though, I wanted to explain, and then I'll take your questions. I know you have questions. I'm getting to them in just a minute. How would you do it in practice if you're not going to avoid it? How much do you give? So, the value of the Zoroa, the Chayim, and the Keva. He writes here that it's apparently, if you were to buy it in the store, that shoulder roast, and the cheek and the tongue and those intestines, it would come to about 500 shekels. For an average sheep.
Beef is so expensive.
Right. Okay. It might have something to do with kosher slaughter, but so 500 shekels. So 500 shekels, but you don't have to give that to a kohen, that amount for each animal. Why? Because that price includes when you buy it in the store, it includes a lot of expenses. You only have to give, right? You don't have the koshering, the packaging, the distribution, the marketing. When you take out all those elements, the value is about half of that. It's only 250 shekels.
When you go to like a farm, you just say to a farm, I want this part of the cow.
That's right.
Maybe something
That's
cheaper.
it. Yeah, about half. And so that's how much you have to give, not the value of those actual shoulder roasts that you would buy in the supermarket. So that already cuts down the amount. It makes it more livable. Now, what you could do is now there's another calculation. If you want, this is the other loophole that I wanted to say. That is the absolute value of the meat when it's at the wholesalers in the plant. But the Kohen doesn't want to go there and get it. There's the price of the transport. That's right. The getting it and transport. The Kohen may live very far away from the koshering plant or from the meat plant, and that could cost for each animal close to 200 shekels. So what you're left with is really what you should be giving to the Kohen is 50 shekels instead of 500 shekels, and it almost becomes negligible. And so really that's why those previous rabbis who we were frowning upon and saying, hey, they're just selling it to a non-Jew and they're avoiding the mitzvah of the Torah. The mitzvah of the Torah, if you really want to translate it to practical implementation, it's quite a small amount and it's insignificant. So just, avoid it. You don't have to calculate exactly how much it would be and make a deal with the Kohen. But I think it's a nice idea. What Muhammad says is that we should try to still somewhat implement the Torah's laws, and you're giving Meiser Ksafim anyways. So this is best to give the 250 shekel value, even though you really don't have to, and make it part of your donations, your scheme of giving tzedakah. Now that I'm done, we're done with the mitzvah number 1, Zoroa l'chaim v'keva. I'll take your questions and I'll share with you my graphic. Yes, please.
Yesterday, somebody at the end of the table was asking, I don't remember who, but was asking about if it has to be, the quarter limb has to be from each animal, or if you could simply add up the
yes.
value.
At the
And
end,
I thought the answer was no at that point, and then I'm questioning how does that compare and contrast that with this?
Right. So for each, the calculation is made, the gift is made from each animal, but at the end of the day, when you give the value, so you just add up the value of all the limbs from all the animals. Right?
Okay.
But officially it is from each animal, but ultimately when we replace it with money for convenience sake, which is allowed, then it doesn't really matter.
But, so then we could do it the other way as well, so we could say the value of 100
Yes.
quarter front quarters would be the equivalent of 30 whole sheep, and so we're going to give 30 whole sheep to the Kohen rather than 100 quarters.
No, You can't in kind. We can only do it. You can only make that transfer if you're changing its value for money. I guess the value of the sheep, the whole sheep.
That's
is
what I'm
worth
saying, the
X
whole
dollars.
sheep.
Yeah, you could. But you could also do it with apples. Why do it with sheep?
Oh,
You could
okay.
pay in apples. It's the same thing. It's the value that matters. Yes, we're going to go around the room, so everybody has a question, has a chance now.
So, Rabbi, when we talk about this, we're talking about a slaughter that's happening in Eretz Israel, or also including Chutz La'aretz?
The custom, even though probably the mitzvah applies in Chutz La'aretz too, because it's not really connected to the land, it's not produce. There are different opinions about that, and the common custom is that in Chutz La'aretz they don't bother with it at all. The Kashrut organizations don't separate Zoroa, the Chayim, the Keva at all. They don't even have a deal with the Kohen. And as we said yesterday, the food is still kosher. It's not considered to be non-kosher like the other truma. But in Israel, they're more careful about it in one of the two ways, either by using this loophole or that loophole, or giving tzedakah. But it does apply officially. In Eretz Israel, you're supposed to take care of it and take off.
And the animal is only related to,
Kosher animals.
including chicken?
No birds. Yeah, we said that yesterday. Yeah.
Two
Thank you,
questions.
Norm.
One
Wait.
quick one. Is the 10% before or after tax?
It's a good question. You're asking about the Ma'aser Ksafim idea, nothing to do with the mitzvah of the limb of the animal.
No.
In general. So that's a separate class. We'll have to talk about it in greater
Maser
detail.
Sachim.
Kesef. Ma'aser Kesafim.
My
Kesef.
question about this is why the transaction with even the poor person when you have fruit or the Kohen, why does it have to be an IOU basis? Or you give the Kohen 1,000 and then he owes you and then you take some off, why can't you just give him?
For
the money?
convenience, because you don't have a Kohen hanging on your sleeve. Right? But if you've already given him the loan and you're just forgoing it, that's something you could do without him.
Or the poor person, why does it have to be a loan?
Same thing, for convenience sake. Okay, you have a question? No? You have a question? No?
I don't know if mine is relevant, so I can say.
Go for it, Ruben, yeah, it's up to you.
Thank you. It was about Josephine.
Yeah,
If it was connected in any way to Abraham giving 10% to Shem.
of course, that's the pattern. In this week's Parsha. And Yaakov doesn't promise to give 10%, beginning of the Parsha. Yeah, it's a custom. It's another class. So some details. There's a machloket whether this is a biblical obligation or most people assume it's rabbinic or even just a custom, which is not binding. But it's definitely a good one. It's definitely a good one, and even 20% is laudable. Any other questions? Hirsch, no, Moshe, everybody's good. Okay, so let's give these out.
Okay, let's do this.
Let's pass these around. Take one fast. Yes.
If I support the Knesset, Shiva.
Yes. What to do with the Ma'aser Ksafim is a good question.
No, but if I support them, I am not obligated with the Maser Ksafim.
Well, whatever you pay for that can be included as a use of your Ma'aser Ksafim. You can use your Ma'aser Ksafim for many different things, but again, it's another class. Talk about the details another time. Let's look. What is this chart? I'm sorry it's all in Hebrew, but if somebody has a nice handwriting, would like to translate into English on behalf of all of us, this is a graphic to enable us to memorize the 24 gifts to the Kohen. We're going to start on the left-hand side, underneath the line. As you can see, there's 10 gifts. The word in the middle is bagavulin. Eser matanot bagvulin. 10 gifts, that means it's not in the temple. It's not even in Jerusalem. It's outside of the temple or Jerusalem area. It's called the borders. The borders meaning the external borders of the land of Israel.
Gevul, that's where the word
Gevul, it comes from that, yeah.
So it's the same thing as Chutz La'aretz?
No, Israel. But it's the borders of the land of Israel as opposed to the borders of the Beit HaMikdash. Gvulin is the opposite of the Mikdash.
Borderlands.
The borderlands, yes, okay. What are the 10 gifts? Let's start with Aleph. Do you see the Aleph in the top right-hand corner?
Yeah.
Where it's about 1 o'clock on the clock? Aleph Truma Gadola. What's that? Who's the go-to?
The Kohen.
Kohen. Bet. What's bet? You see, go to the left, 12 o'clock now. Terumat Maaser. Terumat Maaser is given to the Kohen by who? By the Levies. You can see he looks a little different from the first guy who's actually working the land. Gimel. What's Gimel?
Challah.
Hey, what's that?
A normal person gives the
two.
one.
How much was the original challah?
Was it 1/24th the original?
Excellent. 124 or 148 is an option. Right nowadays we just give a little bit,
The
and that's
148 was if you're a wholesaler, like you're a baker.
correct if you're a baker. Excellent.
4% and 2%.
That's right. Good, good. So that's Aleph Ben Gimel. This is a good review for what we did, huh? Where's Daled? It's on the right hand side. It's about 3 o'clock in the clock.
It looks like
What does it say?
The shrubs.
Reishit Hagez. What's Gez?
Yeah.
Well, we said it yesterday. It's number 5 here. It got erased from the board. Number 5, we're going to talk about it. It's the first shearing from the shearing. That guy is actually taking scissors to shear the wool of a sheep. It's a little bit not a great
Now I see that it's a
copy.
sheep.
Now you see it's a sheep, yes. Okay, yes, sir.
Somebody scribbled it.
Where's hay? Where's number 5? It's 9 o'clock, right? The cow. And what does it show you? Oh, there you go.
The shoulder and the
That's what we've been discussing, right? That's the mitzvah of Zoroa, L'chayayim v'keva, and that's number 5, given to the Kohen. We just talked about it.
It's showing the intestines. I thought we were saying that was the fats.
The keva is the intestine. Keva means intestine, yeah. The fats is something else. Fats is forbidden fats. That's a prohibition in the Torah. There's certain fats that you're not allowed to eat, and some of them are brought onto the altar. But that's not here. There's nothing to do with the Kohen. It's not given to the Kohen. These are only things given to the Kohen. You see the title? 24 gifts to the Kohen. We're up to number 6.
So the Kohen can keep anybody else from having
Wow.
so the Kohen can prevent anybody else from having hot dogs if they want.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
That's exactly it. He's redeeming the child, the firstborn child. We spoke about it yesterday. Number 7,
but it's a
So what is actually
baby
going on?
child,
a human.
human.
Yes. So that's why we give 5 coins of silver to the Kohen, not the
No,
baby.
it's you're not offering a child.
You don't give the baby. No,
Okay.
no,
You're
no.
not
Is that
offering
what-
the baby in a halter.
Go find. You won't find a Kohen who's going to take your baby. It's not so simple. But
I refuse to pay.
That's only when the child's born.
We had a discussion about that a while back.
Firstborn.
We did.
That's only when the child's born.
only for firstborn boy. Correct. Number 7, Zayin. You see it?
Yeah.
It's right. Girls are not
Somebody was
obligated
redeeming
to-
themselves with him when they were younger, and the joke was is that after Rav Begun took possession, that they were considering holding off on the redemption, it's because we
Yeah,
wouldn't
no.
be glad to be Rav Begun's slave for a few weeks.
Boy in my family,
With the
not the
redemption.
first child. Do I still get double the portion of the
No.
inheritance?
Damn.
Zayin. Wait.
No, he doesn't.
I've not a sister.
I see.
He doesn't have to do video, they didn't have to do.
They don't have to do pidyon, but it's the first one that opens the womb.
But no double.
First one.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
It has to be first one as a mother.
7,
If I count
Zayin.
my sister.
It's about 8 o'clock on the clock.
No, that's a sword.
Pidyon Hamor.
Se pidyon Peter Chamor. We're redeeming, guys. Let's get it. 7. You see Zayin?
Yeah.
Pidyon. The man has a sheep that he's gonna give to the Kohen instead of his firstborn donkey. We mentioned it yesterday. Number 8, right underneath that, in the middle, about 6 o'clock. What does it say?
Today, Chova.
Sadeh Achuza. Achuza.
10% of the field?
No,
Yakuza.
not 10%. There were certain fields that if you donate your field to the Kohen, if you donate your field to the Beit HaMikdash, something that you own, you were given it by Yoshua, right? It was part of the lottery, you got this estate, and you want to give it to the Kohen, you give it to the Beit HaMikdash to be part of the temple treasury. Actually, it goes to one of the Kohanim. Kohanim get the donations of that kind, of the sanctifications when someone decides to give that kind of a donation, a holy donation. And number 9 is
Does that revert after? Does that revert under?
never reverse. Never reverse. Number 9, Tet. It's on the right, about 7 o'clock. No, 5 o'clock on the clock. Sdeh Haramim. This is another type of a donation. When someone
Which is
donates
this?
his field, it's Tet. about 5 o'clock on the clock. That's not part of your achuzah, but it's something that you bought, and then you donate it to the temple. That becomes the Kohen's only until the 50th year. It goes back to the original owner. But there is a donation that goes to the Kohen when someone donates a field. And the last one, number 10,
I don't know, what was that called again? I can't read it.
Char Sadeh Charamim. Cherem. Cherem, people know the word cherem. What does it mean?
Excommunication.
Excommunication. That's one meaning, and that's not this meaning.
Right.
The word cherem has a second meaning, which is used in the Torah for a type of donation, type of dedication to the temple. Cherem. Sadeh cherem. A field which you separate off, that's why the similar meaning, you separate it off, but not to be excommunicated. You separate it off as a donation to the temple. And the last one, number 10 at the bottom left, what does it say?
Is that I can't null
Sorry, it's an old sheet. And
Nezer.
Gezel Hager. This is a fascinating one. It's a pasuk in the Torah.
Gezel, Hager?
Yeah, what does that mean?
It means theft of the convert. Gezel, Gezela is
Yes.
theft.
Yes.
Hager is a
Yes.
convert.
Yes.
So why are you stealing money from
You
converts?
shouldn't. You should never steal from anybody, even for converts. Maybe even especially from converts. They need our help more than others. But we don't live in a perfect world.
So we can't steal.
What happens if you committed a crime and you embezzled $1 million from a convert?
Well, that depends.
Well, what happens if you embezzle $1 million from a regular Jew? What do you have to do? It's a mitzvah in the Torah, it's one of the 613, to return stolen goods. You have to return the $1 million to the owner. What if he moved to Hawaii? You got to travel to Hawaii to give back those stolen goods. If it's in kind, then you have to actually give him the goods. If it's money, whatever, you can give money. But what happens if he dies?
Right, so if
He drowned in Hawaii because he drank and then went swimming on the beach. What do? Can you still fulfill the mitzvah? You have to go and give the money back to his children, to his beneficiaries.
Closest relative.
If he doesn't have, so you give to his father. If he doesn't have, you give to his grandfather. If he doesn't give to his uncle. The Talmud says, in general, if you're a Jew, we're going to find a relative of yours. Jewish geography. There's one exception to that.
to Ger, because they don't have inheritors.
And you give it to the Kohen.
Parents either.
The ger doesn't have any relatives by definition. He's like a newborn baby. Of course, he has relationships with his parents, with his biological parents. We're not talking about that. Halachically,
Well, if
he
has
doesn't
children,
have.
give it to the children.
And if he has children, he has children. But if he doesn't have children and he has no heirs, he has no ancestors. And so, what do you do with the $1 million? Give it to the Kohanim. That's number 10.
There's
Okay?
a parasha with this thing, right?
It's a pasuk in the Torah.
Yeah.
It's a pasuk in the Torah.
You have to steal.
100%. You also have to divorce your wife, which I hope you never do.
There was a
There's
guy
many
who did that.
mitzvot which we don't want you to fulfill. And don't volunteer for those ones. But, on the whole, though, the system was devised for the entire Jewish people. So there's going to be someone divorcing his wife. Don't worry about it. And probably what this says is that there's going to be someone stealing, and he's going to have to return the theft. And maybe even there's going to be someone stealing from a convert. And if he dies and there's no other place to give it, you have to give it to the Kohen. Okay? Next.
It could be accidental too.
It could be. Could even accidental, yeah. Let's take a look at the top of the page on the left-hand side.
Honestly, Cohen has such an easy life here. He's getting.
4, can you see what that says? Top left?
Matanot shel Yerushalayim.
4 gifts to the Kohen that have to be eaten in Jerusalem. And we're going to talk about the Aleph very soon. Aleph says, for behema. Firstborn child of an animal, of a kosher animal. You own an animal, it has a baby, you have to give it to the Kohen. And the Kohen has to eat it in Jerusalem if it doesn't have a blemish. We're going to get into the details. What happens if it does have a blemish? Behema. Behema means an animal. Firstborn of an animal. And obviously an animal which is not a donkey, because that gets replaced with a sheep. But kosher animals, the bechor has to be given to the Kohen. Yes.
And need to be done between 8 days and 1 year, right?
I don't know about that. Where'd you get that from?
In the Tanakh. That say that the baby should be 8 days with her mother, and then you can sacrifice.
That's a different law. That's a law that you shouldn't bring a korban of a baby before he reaches. It's not valid to bring a korban in the temple before the age of 1. But this is not. So according to that, he would have to be 1 year old in order to be slaughtered on the altar in Jerusalem. So he must be a year old at least. But as we're going to see, that if he gets a blemish, you can give it to the Kohen before that because it's not going to the altar. He gets to eat it himself. But we're going to talk about all the details of Bechor Be'imah in just a minute once we get through with this sheet. Okay.
Well, I'll wait till then.
Okay. Great. Bet. Bikurim. What's that?
First fruits.
We talked about that, right? Gimel.
Hook.
Chazeh vashok. The chest and the hind leg. These are particular gifts only given to the Kohen from a korban. If a Jew brings a korban to the Beis Hamikdash, and don't confuse that with what we just said before, Zoroa l'chaim v'keva. What we've been talking about is not the chazeh v'shok, 2 different parts of the animal. This has to be given to the Kohen from a sacrifice.
Didn't we say
It's not from a
hind legs weren't kosher?
So, no, we did not say that.
No.
We said that it can be made kosher with great difficulty. And so the custom of many people is not to bother with it, but it's not that it's not kosher. It can be made kosher.
How was this pronounced again?
Chazeh means chest, shok means thigh.
Shok?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like the word shuk, but shok.
Right.
Cholam instead of a kibbutz or a
When
shul.
you buy off, you buy shokhaim.
That's right. That's right. You buy the thighs of a chazeh off. This chazeh is the breast of the chicken. That's right.
And what's that blue label on the chicken that you have to keep on?
And many times, the truth is in Israel you don't have that as much as you do in Chutz La'aretz. But because I grew up in Canada, I know what you're talking about. In many places, the Kashrut organizations, because they have to transport kosher meat from one place to another place, and the people transporting them are non-Jews. We can't rely that they will not switch it out. With non-kosher meat, there's many incentives to be cheaters in this world. Kosher meat being more expensive than others, and so they came up with a system that there's a few systems about the double wrapping, 2 seals. So in the day, I don't know if they still do this, they used a metal, like a metal clip that they would clip onto parts of the chicken, and they still use it.
It's a Supercell.
They don't do it in America.
No?
I've never
Okay.
seen that before.
You've never seen it?
I've seen.
So, because there's other
Oh, I see
systems.
that on the meat. Yeah, Empire does that.
Yeah, Empire does it, so- right, so that's a form of a stamp, it's a form of a seal, that's a kosher sign. And you have to have 2 of them, the labels, another one, so that's what that is.
The
But,
color blue, is that edible?
This one's spicy.
yeah, that ink is not
The
dangerous.
lady stood up for me, said that it's blue.
You don't have to, Number Dalet, number 4.
When I was in kibbutz, they used to buy bulk meat that was cubed, and it had this blue dye on it. I bet that's what it was.
Probably a symbol, probably a symbol for those kosher. Yeah. Number 4, lachmei Daled, lachmei Todah.
We'll go next to this prince.
Where's that, sorry?
Daled, lachmei Todah.
Lachmei Todah.
Yes. And is actually they put 2 together. I don't know why, because they wanted to get to the number 24. Like the 24 books of Tanakh. 24 is a special number. So they put 2 together. The first one is Daled Lachmei Todah, 4 breads. There's a certain korban that you bring, a Thanksgiving korban. We recite the psalm Mizmor LeTodah every day. Every day that you could sacrifice a Thanksgiving offering, we recite that psalm instead. And that's why we don't recite it on Pesach, because part of the additional parts of the korban was not just an animal, but also breads. and all the breads the entire year. All the breads, whenever the Torah mentions bread, it means matzah. It has to be unleavened bread, except for this one and one other. No, that's not stated here. It's a little bit of a trivia question. What's the Thanksgiving offering has to be brought with leavened bread, and a part of each bread has to be given to the Kohen. That's why it's here. What's the other korban that has chametz in it?
Hola.
The
Chat?
The ani for the poor. Don't they make it out of a
Nope. Nobody's guessing right.
korban pesach?
Nope.
Korban tamid.
Korban Pesach?
I know, but I'm just
No chametz.
How many more?
All Pesach.
Korban tamid.
Nope.
Korban.
Okay, I'll tell you because we've got to finish this. The last one, the other one is on Shavuot. There's a special korban on Shavuot of two breads, which were leavened breads. So that it's called the two breads.
In Hebrew.
Shtei halechem. Yeah, sorry, but not so creative. But that's the name of the korban. Anyways, the second thing mentioned here is orot hakodashim, the skins of the korbanot. The skins of every sacrifice was given to the Kohanim. They probably were wearing lots of leather jackets and leather shoes and stuff like that. They were living it up. Now, what's left, we've done 14. What's left is the 10 on the right-hand side of your page. The Eser Matanot Ba.
Mikdash. She'ochlim haKohanim ba'azara.
These have to be eaten by the Kohanim in the, what's the Azara? It's a part of the Beit HaMikdash. Part of the Beit HaMikdash, which only Kohanim could enter.
The dining room.
It's, they weren't allowed to sit. It's very interesting. They must
This
have,
picture shows the guy sitting.
it's a mistake. You can't be.
I
don't think he's sitting.
Doesn't mean that.
I don't see anybody sitting.
Well, it looks like he's sitting.
No sitting. Oh, you're right. You're right. It's strange because they weren't allowed to, but I don't know.
How do you know he's sitting?
It's a good question. The guy in the middle.
I think you're assuming.
Could it be a high table?
His elbows on the table when he's sitting.
So,
Let's go through the Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. This time it goes around in a circle. Around from the Aleph is in the top right hand corner.
Asar korban. Chatat behema.
The flesh from an offering of a sin offering. A sin offering made of an animal. And Bet is a sin offering made of a chicken. Not chicken, turtle dove, whatever, a dove, but it's bird versus animal. Gimel,
Hashem chai.
Asham. Asham, it's a type of korban. It's a special, unique type of a sin offering. For some reason, the Torah separates off a few sins, 5 very unique sins, and says instead of bringing a regular sin offering, you have to bring a sin offering called an asham, not a chatat. The Hebrew word changes. It's called a guilt offering. Asham means guilt.
What's the thing?
I'll tell you another time. Number 4, Asham Talui. This is fascinating. Asham Talui means a guilt offering, but you're not sure. So take, for example,
It's a shogeg, right?
no, not exactly
Not
shogeg.
sure what you did wrong.
You had 2 pieces of meat in front of you, and one of them was kosher, and one was non-kosher.
And you knew for sure that one was kosher and one was not kosher.
You knew for sure one is kosher and one is not kosher. And no, you're not allowed to, of course not.
Well,
You didn't think, and you ate one. And the other one, for example, somebody else ate or got thrown away, so you can't tell which is which. So maybe you violated a very terrible sin, but it's only maybe. So the Torah says you have to bring a doubtful guilt offering to atone for even not knowing if you committed this terrible crime. You have to bring an offering to atone for even doubtfully violating this sin. Very, very telling mitzvah that there is a korban. And then, let's say you brought that offering, you spent $1,000. It's a lot of money to bring a korban. And then someone comes and he says, you remember there were 2 pieces of meat on that table? I ate the other one, and I could tell that it was not kosher meat, or I saw a sign on it, was not that it was kosher. And so that means that now you can prove you actually did commit the crime. Now you have to bring the second one. That's the previous one. Gimel. That's called the for sure guilt offering. Asham vadai and Asham talui. Sometimes you might have to bring both. God takes his sins pretty seriously. Don't violate. And he also takes atonement pretty seriously. Yeah. Yes.
Now, I remember in the beginning of Book of Job, he actually did that.
He brought offerings to atone for the sins of his children.
Yeah, he say that maybe my children did something.
Very interesting. Yafa.
So it's this one. It's the.
Well, that's a unique type because really there's more details.
Out of curiosity, then I'm going to bring this back, roll this back to something. If we took Truma or Misa without a blessing because it was doubtful, and then we discovered afterwards that for sure it had never been taken, would we go back and take it with a bracha?
No. Still valid, the separation even without a bracha. Zayin. This is what I told you before. The trivia question. The answer: Shtei alechem. It's also leavened bread, and the Kohanim would eat it in the temple. Lechem hapanim. What's lechem hapanim? Number 8. They're called the showbread. Usually translated as the showbread. They were put on a special table on some kind of shelves, and every week they would switch it out. And the Kohanim at the end of the week they would eat it.
When there's the shulchan in the
On top of the shulchan, exactly.
but when those ones that always just replenish themselves.
They didn't replenish themselves. They baked them once a week, and every week they would switch them out. They stay fresh the entire week. At the end of the week, when the Kohanim had them, this was a miracle they recite. Number 9, Tet.
Shirei ha-minchot.
Right, to the bottom right, Shiarei Minchat HaOmer. There's a special korban called Korban HaOmer. You might have heard of it. Why? Because of Sfirat HaOmer. For 49 days, we count from the sacrifice of that korban. HaOmer. Omer is just a measure. And the leftovers of that korban was eaten by the Kohanim. It was made from barley. Excellent. As opposed to the lechem hapanim, which we mentioned, the shtei halechem, which was made from a wheat. That was number 7, Zayin. Now we go to Yud, at the bottom left corner. Shirei menachot. What are menachot? Mincha. You know it as the. What is a mincha offering? What does that mean?
It's after Pesach.
No.
The afternoon prayer.
No. The afternoon prayer, we call it mincha, but for no good reason. There's a different meaning to the word. A mincha. You guys got to read that book. It's such a good book. I keep really suggesting you read the Bible, the Torah. There's entire chapters describing 5 different types of mincha offering. It means flour offering. As opposed to animal, most of the offerings that we know of is animal sacrifice. These, and some people say, perhaps when the temple is rebuilt again, we'll have only flour offerings, and no animal offerings anymore. We don't know. We'll see. I don't know. It's just to be nice to the vegetarians. So, but the shiarei menachot, a certain portion of that flour that you would bring in a bowl, you had to put on the altar. What do you do with the rest of it? Kohanim would be using it. Kohanim would eat it. Okay. Next, they bake bread with it, obviously. Next one is.
This is like the tithes.
Oh, there's the 2 on the right that we skipped. The 2 on the right. What are the 2 on the right? The ones that says "Hey" is Shalmei Tzibur. This is, and the bottom one is Shirei Shemen Shel Metzorah. You guys want me to explain what they are?
Mitzvah for the Nazir or something?
Want me to explain what those are?
Sure.
So the one about the Mitzorah is a leper. When a leper purifies himself after a process that he goes through, he has to bring a korban, and part of the korban is oil, and the oil has to be put on his earlobe. But what do you do with the rest of the oil? The Kohanim would get to eat it. They would, use it as salad dressing or whatever it is, and then the one on top of that is Shalmei Tzibur. This is a Korban Shlamim, which is usually, most Korban Shlamim was brought by individual Jews who wanted to thank God or to make a donation. And part of the Shlamim, it's called that because they say it brings shalom. Because part of it goes onto the altar, part of it goes to the owner, the person who brings the korban, and they get to have a barbecue, and part of it goes to the kohanim. So most of the korban shlamim, the kohanim were happy with, but this is two. There's a few shalmei tzibur, meaning that on behalf of the congregation, you bring a communal sacrifice, and of course the meat. A part of that meat would go and be eaten by the Kohanim. The part representing the Jewish people, part of the owner of the Korban. There's no individual owner. The owner of the Korban is the community of Israel. Who gets to get that meat? The Kohanim. So the Kohanim get the Kohanim section and the owner's section of the Shalmei Tzibor. This is the 24 Matnot Kuna. Whoever can recite them to me off by heart will receive a prize.
Will it be?
What's the one like 2 goats?
My car keys. No, just kidding.
We heard that with you did.
No, it's
What's
just
the one where you
said
have
it
2
quickly
goats?
enough. Okay? See what you can do. Have a good day.